My name is Doug Rogers, and I'm a member of the NAUA Worship Committee and the Sailor Sea Fellowship. Mostly I do the music. I have attended church for my entire life, starting as a Methodist and becoming a UU in my 20s. I have always been interested in how religion works. I'm an engineer, after all. And I see that conventional religion is slowly dying in the Western world. I don't quite know why. Perhaps we are too focused on science. But recently I have read some science that has me convinced that there is life after death, that we are immortal souls in physical bodies, and there is a spiritual realm. Although that world is invisible to most people most of the time, including me. I don't pretend to understand this spiritual world, but I believe that it does exist, that it is complex with layers and structure, and populated with spiritual beings of various sorts, and large. I believe that we are here to experience living within the limits of the physical world, with its joys and sorrows, its beauty, its excitement and boredom. We are here to help ourselves and others around us, those we know and those we don't. As the Dalai Lama likes to say, practice kindness. That's the most important thing. I believe that religion is good for people. People have always had religion, from the tribal people who worshipped features of their environment to the more complex and abstract religions that formed in past centuries and that are still practiced by people around the world today. But organized religion has been slowly failing in the modern world, and I have wondered why. Today, I would say that the ancient truths are formatted in a way that no longer relates to the kind of lives that we live. Therefore, I believe we should put our efforts into building a new religious culture that includes the wisdom of the past and the science of our times. Religion means coming together in person as much as we can and affirming our belief that we need to take care of ourselves and each other. It means gatherings for ritual practices as well as to just be together. Don't forget that none of us lives independently. We each have different beliefs. We must respect each other and meet somewhere in the middle. Whether you believe in a spirit world or not, there is plenty for all of us to do right here. Singing is near the top of that list for me. It feels good. You can do it with others. Thanks for listening.
Good morning. My name is Joyce Kinnear, and I'm on the NAUA Worship Committee. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes with you today talking about my religious history and my beliefs and how we as Unitarians can share those together. I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist, a very conservative Seventh-day Adventist. A lot of my early childhood was in the South. And in those churches, the man was strongly encouraged to have total control over his wife and children, often with physical beating, spare the rod and spoil the child, and no questioning of the church doctrine was allowed. While I appreciated the social aspect of the church and really great work with children and music and spending time together socially and the ability to talk about and think about theology, I did not appreciate the rest of the control over personal life, and I left that church in my 20s and became a Unitarian. I've been a Unitarian ever since, and I appreciate the ability to think about who I am and what I want to add to the world. I believe in humanism in that I believe that humans, all of us, have the right and the responsibility to create a better place for all of us who live here, humans, animals, and plant life, everything, and make this a better place, because this earth is our heaven or our hell, depending on what we make of it. And because of that, I have strong beliefs in trying to help make the world a better place. My efforts have particularly been for women and children, as shouldn't be a surprise given my history, but I am supporter of many other areas in which we are trying to work together better and to make it a better place for everyone. I am really interested in talking with each of you in the NAUA, and I think that our foundation on rationality and reason and tolerance, those are very important to living together and to having a really great community while we are focused on our goals. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Roy Dickerson. I'm with the Hayward Fellowship. I wanted to talk today a little bit about my beliefs in terms of religion. We come together for many reasons. Community brings many benefits. I can't imagine what it would be like to live alone and without the advantages of our shared existence. People, animals, and even plants thrive in groups. Communities not only allow us to thrive materially, but they also encourage cooperation and understanding. I believe that religions came about in part to bind us to our community. Having common beliefs and rituals for important moments in our lives gives meaning and roots in the shortness of our existence. Fundamental to our lives is how temporary it is. Religion attempts to raise hope for a continuation of the consciousness and a greater understanding of what our purpose is. Religion plays a defining role in how we have come together in our communities. Trade, legal system, and family structure. Everything we do has been influenced by religion. Religion was used in the past to legitimize monarchies, and then it was religion that led to our enlightenment and the rise of democratic states. The responsibility for decisions and thoughts swung to the individual, where once we had direction and safety via the hierarchy, the individual now had rights and control. The religious model I believe in evolved along with our country's founding. Perhaps the best example of this model are John Locke's Dry Club, Ben Franklin's Junto, and Cotton Mather's neighborhood societies. These all had community betterment, individual advancement, responsible citizenship, and at their core, a religious aspect. Today, however, community is hard to find. We often have little interaction with our neighbors. Our family members are miles away, and the people we work with are more interested in beating the commute traffic than getting together after work. We have moved beyond the church hierarchy controlling things, but many have lost interest in taking on the responsibility for individual and group agency. Something is missing if you are not an active part of family and community. Something is missing if you ignore the big questions that surround us and don't talk about them. We're done with someone telling us the answers, but we haven't moved past needing to ask the questions and puzzling it out. Whether it be life after death, how to relate to someone, or a million other questions about existence, the responsibility rests within us. Maybe we will never find the answers, but there is comfort in knowing people care about you and searching. Even if others don't agree with you. On the big question, I believe in reincarnation, even though I can't prove it. Ben Franklin put it this way on his epitaph: "The body of B. Franklin, printer like the cover of an old book, its contents torn out and stripped of its lettering and gilding, lies here, food for worms, but the work shall not be wholly lost, for it will, as he believed, appear once more in a new and more perfect edition, corrected and amended by the author." Thanks.
Hello, my name is Joyce Francis. I'm a member of the NAUA and also the 1.5-year-old Salish Sea Fellowship here in Port Hadlock, Washington on the Olympic Peninsula. I believe in grace, not the grace that John Newton wrote about in his song Amazing Grace. I'm sure you know the words, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. Newton's beautiful spiritual represents for me the Christian notion of grace, being redeemed by God, a blessing that may be bestowed when one finds faith in God. While I understand this view to be a comfort to many, it is not a belief that I personally hold. I'm an agnostic, believing that I can have no evidence, no knowledge through my senses or my reason, that there is a creator, a loving and redeeming God, or an afterlife. Thus, God is not a topic I spend time exploring. I choose to concentrate on trying to fully live this life. However, I refuse to relinquish to the deists a belief in grace. My notion of grace comes closer to that of Dan Wakefield in his book, Expect a Miracle, about the seemingly miraculous things that happen to ordinary people. He says, this universe in which we were born and this planet on which we walk are unearned gifts. That's what grace is. Take gravity. Rather take it away, and this planet and everything on it would fly apart. Grace is unearned. Life itself is a gift of grace. We didn't earn the right to be born. We didn't have to ask to be born. Birth came to us as a gift. If you would appreciate grace, look for it in ordinary places, he says. That's great. I'm repeating that. If you appreciate grace, look for it in ordinary places. Doris Lessing, the Nobel Prize-winning British author, perhaps best captures my agnostic's view of grace as something given by nature in her role of spendthrift. Something given by nature in her role of spendthrift. I like that. My personal graces that I can and I have been generously offered from life, from nature, if you will, without my earning them. Inspired by Doris Lessing, I like to call those nature's graces. Newton and most Christian theologians hold that God's grace comes to believers when they're at the lowest, spiritually lost, in despair. In contrast, my experience of nature's graces have come on ordinary days when I was stumbling through my ever so ordinary life. One such moment is the epiphany I felt when I first saw the Salish Sea 35 years ago on a bicycle tour with friends. I met my husband that same year, and I told him then that I had to live here one day without any idea of how to make that happen, but with calm assurance that it would. I had to be patient. It took us 18 years, but here we are. I'm an agnostic as to the source of these nature's graces. I believe that I cannot know. What's more interesting and relevant for me is how I might be more open to nature's graces in my life. I would dearly love to wake up every morning of my life ready to receive the next grace awaiting me. I want to leave you with this blessing. May the memories we gather here today give you hope for the future. May the fellowship we share strengthen you and bring joy to your heart. May nature's graces be upon you this day and forever. Thanks for listening.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lorraine Day. I live up here in Birch Bay, Washington. I'm a member of the worship team, and when the plan formed to put together this collection of members' thoughts on spirituality, our church, and how we see ourselves in this beautiful puzzle of existence, I was stymied. I mean, what on earth could I say? The older I get, the less I know about anything. I wasn't born into any church. My parents' religious teaching consisted of instructing me to fill in my school enrollment forms by checking Protestant. Yes, in those days they asked, not because we were Protestant particularly, but because they didn't want anyone to mistake me for a Catholic. We never went to church. My older sister actually married a Catholic boy, and in order to have a Catholic wedding, she had to get educated. I found hidden in her car a rosary and a small secret book titled Missal. That was the extent of my exposure to religion or to church. But in my early teens, I became possessed of a fervent hunger for religion, for God. I read every book I could find on Christianity. That was the only religion I knew. And I had trouble falling asleep at night for all the longing in my heart and all the questions in my head. These were the days of the Jesus movement, and I lived in Southern California, so naturally, the next step was for me to be baptized as born again in the Pacific by a young hippie in a long white robe. I hoped that when he pulled me up out of the water, things would be different, that I would be born again. I wasn't. But my hunger for religious connection never left me, and my search for a spiritual home persisted. Over the next decade or so, I guess I visited or studied them all: Judaism, the Quakers, Baha'i, Buddhism, all forms, I think, and of course, especially Zen. The devotional faiths coming out of India, especially as presented by Baba Ram Das and Paramahansa Yogananda. Scientology, now that was a thing in the 70s, and science of mind. Even a very short stint with the Unification Church. That's right, the Moonies. The teachings and practices of the Armenian mystic Gurdjieff, the Center for Spiritual Living, Unity, Matthew Fox's creation spirituality. Almost all of them spoke to me in some way, but in other ways they were silent. All of these and probably other teachings I just can't recall right now. Over time, the closest thing I've found to a religion that speaks to me is the thinking of the psychologist Carl Jung and his ideas of the transcendent function of the psyche. Jung said that a religion can only exist within a psychological container, a culture, and once that God leaves the container, you can't put it back in. You have to find a new God. He felt that modern man is in an era of trying to find a new God that fits our modern container. Jung also said that modern man struggles to find God because he doesn't look low enough. I like that. It's easy to sense the presence of something sublime when you contemplate the stars. It's a lot harder to make that connection here on Earth. Here you have to kind of be intentional about looking most of the time. I needed a church that encourages its members to do that, to name their own gods, gods that fit their own psychological and spiritual containers. Now, you know, I don't mean Sun Myung Moon or that guy who led his followers to Jonestown, or even Donald Trump, who has his own followers. I'm sure not looking for that. For me, it means being on the lookout for ways to connect with that nourishing mystery in which we live and move and have our being, and to try to find answers to Billy Kwan's endless question in the movie The Year of Living Dangerously. What then must we do? What then must we do? I found Unitarianism in the mid-70s, and I knew it was my home immediately. This was a place of like-minded people, curious, open-minded people of widely varying beliefs and practices, but who hung together tied by the 7 principles and drawing from many spiritual sources. Being a Unitarian gives me a space to not have beliefs, space to be unknowing, a space where, as Rilke said, we can live in the questions and be patient with unsolved issues, a place which embraces uncertainty and that allows answers to emerge organically over time, a place that encourages a contemplative way of engaging with the complexities of life. That's why I'm a Unitarian. Now, there's no denying it, the Unitarian Universalist Church, under the umbrella of the UUA, has changed. Most of us here feel it lost its way, became something entirely in opposition to its own history and principles. This cultural shift has been painful and even traumatic for many of us here. But the NAUA has formed and is coalescing into a body that holds to and protects the traditional values of Unitarianism, what our mission statement calls the Enlightenment values of freedom, reason, and tolerance. The programs offered here, the services, the circles, and the community of others who are also building their own theology feeds me while supporting my freedom to wonder and grow, and most importantly, to keep that eye out for connection to that nourishing mystery that abides.